Nigel, thanks for sitting with me today. Why are you running for the seat of Keppel?
Thanks for having me, Levi. It's brilliant to be here and to have this opportunity. I'm running because and I think most Queenslanders are looking for change at this coming election. Our communities are suffering, they're struggling. I think even maybe 6 years ago, if you'd had the conversation around a crime, we went, that's something's happening in Townsville a lot, and it was isolated. But now we all feel that way. We're all victims of crime. We have had crime in our own backyard, or we've had crime in our neighbourhood. We've got higher home and contents insurance costs before of it. We've got higher bills when we actually go buy things from people because their businesses have been victims of crime. Now that we've all become the victim, and now that we're all experiencing in our day-to-day lives, I think Queenslanders are ready for change. And for me, when I saw the Premier stand up on TV, and admittedly it was out of context, but the giggling about crime, when you had that member of the ALP from down south who was saying, there's no crime crisis, there's nothing to see here. I went, you've lost touch with what the experiences are of Queenslanders, and we need to have a secure, stable, and an alternate that people can trust, and I want to be part of that. So that's why I put my hand up, is that I, to be honest, got sick of the idea that crime was something that we should just accept and that we should lock ourselves away because no one was going to do the logical thing and actually hold people accountable for their actions.
That's good. How does your party, or yourself as a candidate, foresee that you'll deal with the growth that's coming to our region? There's numbers being thrown around like there's potentially 55%, growth over the next 7 years. There's a lot that needs to be done to get ready for that.
It is an exciting prospect, but also one that we have to manage. And I think that, my previous experience as a councillor over the last decade has shown me that every community wishes to be unique. So we need to protect what holds it as a unique community. We don't want to be a cookie cutter of Noosa, or we don't want to be a cookie cutter of the Sunshine Coast. We want to be ourselves, and you see that differential in Emu Park, Yeppoon, and even in the suburbs of North Rockhampton. You see that there's distinct flavours, but we have to work at that. So that work happens both at a council level in terms of town plan. It happens at a regional level, so engagement with state development and councils in the regional plan, the region plan. And then it's about how we actually invest in the infrastructure to support it, because as you and I are all experiencing, the housing crisis we have is not that all of a sudden a whole heap of houses disappeared. It's as more people want to come here, and we know that it's about an 8% growth rate, one of the highest in the state for this region. Supply is where where we're being let down at the moment. So how do we add extra supply without reducing the quality or the special things that make a community unique? Well, we do that by investing in infrastructure and doing it in clever ways. So the LNP has announced the $2 billion infrastructure fund, which is designed to not only supercharge the housing economy, but also to work with councils. We need to work hand in glove. So here in Livingston, we know that the Tamby Road corridor is a place where there is so much investment that could be made in terms of adding to supply, but we need water, we need sewage, and we need the road accesses. Mayor Bellows spoke just the other week to Tim Mander, the Shadow Housing Minister, around the East-West Connect Road that would allow growth in that Tamby Road corridor without adding to congestion, which is already building up on Tarangabar-Tamby Road intersection and then the Tamby Road, Yeppoon-Rocky Road intersection. These things are kind of like puzzle pieces. You've got to do them all at the one time, but you've got to be willing to invest and not go, I'm going to do it all myself, but actually go, I need to be in partnership with the councils, so working with Rocky Regional Council and Livingston to make it happen, and have in mind that you've got to protect the integrity and the things that people love about their community as it grows, not just go, well, the answer is to put this in and then go, oh, sorry, we lost something along the way. It's thoughtful, intentful development which promotes the community that we actually all have chosen to live here. Like, we live in the best place in the world. Why would we want it to, we understand why people want to come, but we don't want it necessarily to change. We just want the services that we need. And I guess, that comes down to infrastructure services, but what about then the health services? What about the access to police and the fire brigade and the other things that we need in our community? And we've got to be ready and be investing in that for the future of our community, because the hospital that was built in the early 2000s is not going to be the hospital that's going to meet the needs of 2024 even, let alone 2040, let alone 2050. So where's our strategic plans where we're actually talking about how we invest in that and how we make sure that we develop the skills and staff to then have the people to work in these places as we move forward?
What do you see that an MP's job actually is?
Yeah, I think MPs have three distinct roles. The first one is that they have to fight for their community. When parliamentarians go down to Parliament, we see that every community is represented, but in this system that we have, where we have either the government or the opposition, the role of the MP is to fight to make sure that their community not only gets their share, and if we think about CQ being the bedrock of the royalties that are drawn from the ground here, from the hard work of people who work in mining and other industries, we need to make sure that CQ is getting our share back, but also fighting for and being the advocate for the fact that, we need better healthcare, we need better access to police and resourcing along that journey. So that's one part, is being the fighter for your community. The second part is also being a leader for that community. So we've seen in the last decade some huge challenges. So we've had Cyclone Marcia, we've had the fires that devastated our community at times like that. They want our leaders to come forward, not just to shake a hand or to be there, but to actually say, okay, this is how we're going to move forward together. This is someone who's going to offer up the suggestions and the visions that will help drive us forward, as well as providing that nurturing and care. And I think that's really, really important. Quite often we confuse turning up with helping out, and they're not the same thing. So you have the MP that turns up and takes their photo out the front of the school gate, or the MP that stands and gives the award at parade, but are they the same person who's actually helping out? And we need our MPs to help our communities in those times of crisis, just as we do in times of peace. And the third role is to govern for Queenslanders. Queensland is a diverse place of many people, but Queenslanders know what they want, and they are very willing to tell you exactly how they feel about things, as long as you're willing to listen. And then that has to become the policy of government. So how are you using the feedback from Queenslanders to make the policy? I think one of the challenges we see at the moment is we've got a government that at some point stopped listening to Queenslanders. They stopped hearing us when we started saying, hey, this crime doesn't seem to be going away, or it's seemingly getting it worse, or hey, I'm really concerned about hospital ramping at Rockhampton, or I'm really concerned that services I used to be able to access at Yeppoon Hospital are no longer there. When you stop hearing that voice, you've stopped governing for Queenslanders. Instead, you're governing at Queenslanders. And I hope to be part of a government led by David Crisafulli that brings back and has listened to Queenslanders. The last 400 days of the campaign for me as a candidate who was announced mid-year last year has been about listening to Central Queenslanders. What are their challenges? What are their problems? And even a little brochure that I had out, we had a huge survey where we've actually asked again and again, tell us what are your priorities, what are the things that concern you, and the Right Priorities for Queensland document that David Crisafulli and the LNP are using as their guiding document speaks to these. So number one for Central Queenslanders was making our local area the safest place to raise a family. Well, that matches very strongly with what a lot of us are experiencing here in terms of the chaos and crisis of crime. Number two was around providing hospitals and health services we need. So we know that there's a need to invest in the doctors and the nurses in the facilities, but also getting doctors and nurses back in charge so that we've got those with experience, not just the experts leading us. Number three, I think you mentioned it earlier, around housing affordability and access. So investing in the infrastructure to help on the supply side to ensure that our long-term locals who've invested their families, invested their service into our community aren't priced out of the market because of the changing dynamics. I think of the Arnolds over at Cooey Bay who Mr. Arnold built the house literally with his bare hands, yet because the value of their property went to over $1 million, all of a sudden their rates are much higher than what they could possibly afford on their pension, and they ended up being priced out, not because they had ceased to choose this to be their family home or their community, but simply because it was no longer affordable. So working in that space around the supply side to help reduce that. Lowering cost of living, we all know the cost of living crisis we're facing. And number 5, investing in regional services and infrastructure. We make a conscious choice to live here, not down in the southeast corner. We should have access to the same gold class standard hospitals as what you should be able to access in Brisbane. We should be able to drive on our parts of the Bruce Highway and not have to worry around, are we going to make it home safely, or is there going to be a pothole that's going to take my car off the road? Just as you can if you live in a major centre. You shouldn't be punished for choosing to live in regional Queensland. I mean, we are the most diverse state in Australia. Western Australia will make a claim to it, but when you go from the tropics down to the Gold Coast, there is such diversity there. We should have access to those services, and that's what your people from Central Queensland, and particularly the people in Keppel who have filled in the survey, that's what they're calling for, and that's what I want to fight for if I have the honour of serving them as their MP.
You're passionate. I can hear it. The next question I had was the sort of touching on the 3 key or major issues that you see most important to the people of Keppel. You've mentioned a few there. Did you want to reiterate those? Is it unfair to make you choose 3? What do you think is?
So every day I'm talking to people across Keppel, both in the northern suburbs of Rockhampton as well as on the coast, and it is unanimous. It is crime. So they are concerned around being safe in their home, they're concerned around being safe in their workplace, and they're concerned around being safe in their community. So the Making Queensland Safer laws that a David Crisafulli-led LNP government will introduce, and will introduce before the end of the year if elected this October, talks to adult crime, adult time. Early intervention programs and rehabilitation programs for young people, because you cannot be tough on crime if you're also not tough on the causes of crime. It talks about engaging in the child safety space to try and produce better outcomes for our young people so they have a life of choice, not chance. It talks about holding people accountable for their actions and giving voice to our victims. At the moment, it appears that the only way our victims get heard is when they're on the TV or on the paper. It doesn't suggest that the youth justice system is supporting them, but rather protecting those who are committing the acts. So we want to reverse that, and that's number 1. Number 2 is healthcare, and again, it's that same idea, the tyranny of distance from people who live on the coast to accessing Rocky services, people who live in central Queensland to access services that they're providing in Brisbane, yet we can't get access to here. We need to change that, and that starts by actually having more locals engaged with the leadership of CQ Health, but also then making sure that we put doctors and nurses back in charge so that those with experience are giving just as much weight as those who are experts in their field. We've got brilliant doctors and nurses who are working so bloody hard, but there's simply not enough of them, and the resources they need are not necessarily going where they need to be because of the wrong priorities. And obviously the LNP's right priorities documents about changing that track and changing that course back. And number 3 is that housing issue. I think every Central Queenslander wants to be able to have their own home. It doesn't matter if you're one of the growing number of over 50s who are facing homelessness because of breakdown of marriages or just economic circumstance, or you're people who are trying to get into your first home as a couple or as an individual. I can't imagine the pressure of being someone in their 20s who's only on a single income trying to get into the housing market at the moment. It feels impossible for married couples, let alone anyone else. So we need to work on that, and they are the top 3 priorities for Keppel, and they're the things that I'm going to work hard for to make sure that we can make a difference for everyone if I have the honour of serving our community.
All right. I guess one of the ones I wanted to dive into there a little bit more is cost of living.
Yep.
And what real solutions, you mentioned a few different policies and things like that look to be introduced, but realistically, I say it all the time, I don't believe the government is meant to solve all of our problems necessarily. They obviously, through good governance and policy, can help make things flourish. But what can a government actually do to improve that cost of living?
I guess I agree that government cannot possibly do everything for everyone, but where it does have levers that it can leverage to support that, then it should definitely. So home and contents insurance is a great one. I know that people who live at Lammermoor saw theirs go up from $2,000 to close to $4,000 this last year because of the spate of crime. So we can't change how the insurance company feels about it, but what we can do is work on reducing crime in that front. Electricity is another one. We know that Callide Power Station has not been operational at 100% for over 1,000 days. Over 1,000 days, where central Queensland, that produces some of the best and cleanest coal in the country, that has the capacity to generate electricity, has been working at less than 50%, and that's driving up electricity prices. So that's something the government has a role to play in directly as the owner of those assets, and I believe that we need to get in that space. And I know that David Crisafulli and the team are talking now, saying, hey, you've had the report. They hid the report for a while. They've now produced the report that says that there's another report that's needed. We're going to work on actually fixing the problem and maintaining our assets so that we're not actually adding to the problem of electricity prices because of that. So they're two examples where I think government has a direct way of leveraging to make a difference. Indirectly, we know that the work that's being done by the current government, they've looked at, they've looked at supermarkets, they've looked at shopping centres, they've looked at petrol stations. We have to work out, are we trying to run a market-driven economy, or are we actually trying to run something else? I can't imagine today that there would be any Queenslander that would expect that if the government's going to open a petrol station for $3 million, so each of their petrol stations, there's 12 of them, $3 million a pop, are they going to be serving cigarettes over the counter, or is that a health initiative? Or are they going to be doing any of the, and how many small businesses are they going to put out? So by going into a marketplace, they're getting rid of the small competitors, they're getting rid of the small independent market holder who's working really hard at maintaining their business. So we need to keep out of parts of the economy. And as one small business owner said to me, Nigel, the one thing I don't want you to do is come in and change everything on day one. He said, if you win, he said, what small business needs is continuity, stability, and we just need a chance to actually be able to work. Every time the government comes out with another set of regulations, another set of standards that they have to meet, they're adding to the governance of small business, but they're also then changing the game for them again. So instead of getting to work on the business and growing their business, which is the dream of every business owner, they're just trying to make sure that they're not going to fall in a pit hole on the way to where their business is today. And we need to work on that. And I know that Brent Mickelberg, the small business shadow minister for the LNP, is really, really keen to see where we can work on green tape, red tape, and just try and make sure that we're supporting our business community to flourish, because more than 80% of Queenslanders work in small business. So why would we not want to make sure that you've got the environment to succeed?
Very good. So when it comes to being a member of parliament, what's the difference between a conscience vote and crossing the floor?
A conscience vote is where a political party believes that an individual should have the capacity, or where there'll be no guidance given. In the UK system, which obviously ours is derived from in terms of Westminster, they talk about a 1-line, 2-line or 3-line whip. When these events occur, what they're saying is that everyone should use their own judgment and guidance without having an official party position that they must follow. Where we see people crossing the floor, what that means is generally that there's a party position that an individual has taken. I feel like a teacher for a moment, and I'll just do a real teacher. It's where a party has provided a position that they believe is the collective response of the government, and obviously it's much more powerful and influential in terms of the governing party as opposed to someone who's in opposition, that they go, this is what we want to do as a collective. We've had party room votes related to the development of this policy. Hopefully it's gone through a policy of not only party unit development, but then party room debate to get to a position and saying, well, this is the party room position that we're willing to take forward, and we want all members to move forward. So someone who crosses the floor is saying, hey, I've looked at this, I've heard the debate, but in all good consciousness, or for my community, this is the wrong thing, and therefore I'll vote against it. And I guess that's one of the things that is different between the Labor Party and the LNP. So in the Labor Party, a person who crosses the floor very strongly risks being disendorsed, and we saw that in the Senate earlier this year, that there was a member of the Senate, a Western Australian ALP senator, who crossed the floor and ultimately was expelled or resigned from the party before she was expelled. I'm not quite sure how that went down in the end. You get so many different stories. Where in the LNP, like people like Barnaby Joyce have crossed the floor on things that mattered to Queenslanders. People have crossed the floor. The member for Bass crossed the floor earlier. The member for Bass? Gosh, lost her there for a second. One of the Tasmanian members of parliament crossed the floor for something in her community during the Morrison government. Is it something that makes you the flavour of the month with the leader of your political party? Undoubtedly not, but the policy of the Liberal National Party has always been that your community should come first. And I think you're not going to be punished. You're not going to be rewarded for it, but you're definitely not going to be punished when you put your community first. And I think, we see when Michelle Landry came out and spoke about a couple of issues early on in the previous term of government, it was because for Central Queensland, she wanted to make sure that we got the right deal for us. And I'm proud to be part of a political party that respects that your job first and foremost is for your community. It's not about solidarity within a movement that guarantees other things. But you have to keep that all in balance and conjecture and running.
Yeah, good. No, and your inner teacher did come out there for a second. I did see that.
I apologise.
Okay, so within Labor and the LNP, there seem to be factions, and I guess there's all these crazy labels out there about woke or right wing or conservative, or there's what some of those words even mean. Probably everyone has a different definition anyway. But what I guess I'm just trying to get at is within a party, people might lean more left or right. Where would you say within the LNP you really sit on that spectrum, because each party tends to have their own sort of side?
Yeah, I've heard many of those labels and a lot of that stuff, and I go, well, I'm on Team CQ. So Central Queenslanders are not going to benefit from having an MP who's a member of any faction who's driven by agendas other than what's good for CQ. I, along with Donna Kirkland, the candidate for Rockhampton, and Glenn Kelly, the candidate for Moroney, have said that we're fighting for CQ. We're fighting for change for CQ in terms of the government, but we're also fighting for the voice of CQ to be heard. While we've had members of the government for 2 out of those 3 electorates during this current term, I don't think our voice has really been heard. I don't think that CQ's been stood up for. I look at what Matt Canavan's done for CQ in the Senate. I look what Michelle Landry's doing for CQ in the House of Reps and go, we are stronger when we work together and when we're working for that cause. So I'm always going to say that I'm on Team CQ, and that's where I want to be. It's not about ideology. I'm a member of the Liberal National Party. I was there when we voted yes to combine the Liberals and the Nationals a long time ago, before I stepped away from party politics to run as an independent candidate for councillor. Only rejoined as I was leaving council because I believed that there was a future where I wanted to actually engage and be part of finding the solutions for Queensland. And now that I'm here in this role, it's got to be about Team CQ, and the ideology's got really doesn't, I don't believe, affects looking for solutions for Central Queenslanders. All it does is give people an excuse to say, oh, well, I'm part of this group or that group, which is why I'm not going to do what you are asking today. That's excuses. We need to move beyond excuses. Otherwise, Central Queenslanders don't live their life going, oh, well, I'm this or I'm that. They go, well, I'm a local, I live here. I just expect that logical things the government will do for me will get done.
Okay, fair enough. How do you think that voters might make a decision on, or assumption on, how a candidate will vote when issues that aren't current now, there'll be issues that come up in the future? Are you relying on those people reaching out to you to inform you of that? But they're also that may contradict some of your own personal opinions. So how does a voter actually? That's why I guess I asked that question, was to try and get an idea of where a candidate may actually land when it comes to future issues.
Okay. That's a really good question, and one that I think deserves a thorough answer. I guess on the one level, it is about, if we're saying, and I am saying, that Queenslanders deserve a government that listens, that doesn't stop because in 50 days there's an election. So if I get chosen to represent our community, I'll still be going out. I'll still be going to the markets that we've been doing for the last over a year with the LNP team. We'll still be connecting with people and providing opportunities for people to share their views. Now, in terms of my individual values, so I have some really, really strong. I have my own faith, I have my own values. However, when people elect me to represent them, they want to know that I'm going to look after all of Central Queenslanders, and that's a legitimate request, that I shouldn't be caring more about the people who live at Cooey Bay than I do the people who live at Frenchville. They don't want to know that I'm going to ignore the people of Lakes Creek to the detriment of the people who live at Parkhurst. We have to make sure that when we're providing the foundation, which is the Right Priorities for Queensland document, it sets out the aspirations of the LNP. And I'd encourage everyone to go have a look at this document, because it's not something that's a 2-minute fix. And we know that there are some problems, and as you've alluded to, that require actually a substantial amount of change over time. This talks about values. This talks about supporting small business. This talks about a belief that education is the bedrock that sets up children for their life beyond. It talks about access for healthcare for Queenslanders, no matter where you live. These are the values that set in stone where we're going as a party, and I want to be part of that. And when I speak to locals and share what we've got as our priorities, it's a reflection back of what we've heard from the community, and we'll continue to work that way. I think that's a good system of government, that when you stop listening, you should be turfed out, and that's what I believe we should be doing to the current government. They've stopped listening, they need to go, and we need to actually bring in someone who's heard from the community and is driven by the community's agenda.
Okay, very good. So I guess to dig into a particular issue here, the LNP have made it clear that they won't challenge the current laws on abortion that that Labor currently have existing, but haven't made that super clear. Do you think that, have you got a different view to that within the party, that's something you might cross the floor on, or would it be good for the party to clarify that?
I'm going to be really, really honest that I don't have a great answer to this question, in that it's not something that in my life, myself, my wife, we've had to deal with. And so I personally believe that I'm on a bit of a journey of understanding, and to answer your question is, I want to be part of a community where people have choice. So I would say that I am pro-choice, but I also want to be part of a community where people have choice, not because there's a chance that the systems around them are going to fail. So we need to make sure that the systems are in place. The chaos and crisis of healthcare systems, the support for people with disabilities, the systems that we have in place in terms of both child protection, child safety, all of these give cause for people to have queries and to question the success of society outside of the nuclear family. That should not be the decision that people have to make. And I think that if we create an environment where as a society we not only support and look after each other, then people will be able to make their own choice, which is, I believe, and should be their right. But I also believe that they'll have the freedom to know that whatever the choice they make, that they'll be supported and looked after by the community, because that's what we do as a society, is we pick people up and we hold those who are most weak or most at risk and support them. And that's the community that I want to be part of, that no one feels obliged to make a choice just because they don't believe that there's going to be those supports in place. So it's one that, it's a difficult one, and I understand that there's a lot of conjecture in the community. And to be honest, I was really, if I'm frank, I was disgusted to see the state member using this as a political football. I think that this is intrinsic about people's rights and freedoms, and yet to offer veiled, and not even veiled criticism, to just offer criticism with no detail, to have no understanding, to have not even asked the question as to suggest that people were one way or the other, or to use this as a political argument as opposed to what should be about, well, what are we doing as society to help lift people up and protect them, nurture them, support them. I just thought it was dirty politics, and I've lived my life for the last 10 years trying to never be part of that and to work on actually living in a society that is good, that supports people, and actually means that people should have hope. We should have hope for better days, and that's what I believe an LNP government led by David Crisafulli will give Queenslanders hope that things can change. And in just 50 days, we'll find out if Queenslanders have agreed with that formula, and then if the fates are on my side and I get a chance, I want to serve and help make that difference for Queenslanders.
Okay, very good. Thanks for answering that. And like I said, tough question. Tried to not just give you softballs
No,
today.
That's okay.
So what do you actually believe makes strong families within a community, and then what's a government's role in supporting that?
I think families require three things. They require love, they require stability, and they require community. I don't think anyone grows up in isolation. The quote, a child is raised by a village, or the village raises the child. It's very true. I've my wife and I have committed our life to raising our children very much in that space. In fact, our first daughter was born the year after my first election as a councillor. So from about 6 weeks old, she's gone to art gallery launches, and she's been part of what my services look like in the Lions Club. She's been part of the projects that we've done with iCare, where we're collecting food for the homeless or for the needy, where we've actually engaged with the domestic and family violence space. My children have been part of that because I want children to grow up in a world where they are born and raised as people who give, so that as adults they'll continue that on. So I think the space that we look for families is that there's a place of love. It's a place of stability. So children have boundaries. They know what those boundaries are. They have their needs being met directly by their parents, by their grandparents, whoever it is that's making up their family. They are providing the love and stability they need and the boundaries, but they also have the community there with them. Because you and I are both dads. We know that there are hard times around every corner. There's that moment when, you have that week where they just don't go to sleep properly and they're not well, and because they're so little, they can't even articulate it properly to you. So you know that there's pain, and all you can do is try and nurture and support it. That's when, the loving hand of your mum, your dad, or your community, for people who've actually moved further away from family, can be there to support you. When times get tough, so say dad loses his job unexpectedly and a family is in crisis, that's where things like iCare, which, I've been a part of for the last 5 years, iCare is designed there to be a hand up, not a hand out. So it's designed to help someone at their lowest so that they can keep moving, because we want to support people. So I think there's a space there. In terms of the role for government, there is so much going on in this space. Sometimes you could almost be forgiven for not knowing all the range of services that are there. Government needs to be good at providing referral, but it also needs to be providing, to my mind, a non-judgmental opportunity to connect. Because the worst thing in the world is someone who takes their family and is living in a car behind a building because they're worried of what the government or they're going to take my kids away, they're going to do this. Those are not people who don't love their children. They're not people who are actually trying to provide. They've just hit rock bottom and they need a hand up. Government also, in my mind, needs to actually put the rights of children and the rights of families into focus and commit to working with families to help them. Because if we're doing early intervention work with young people who are at risk of crime, if we're doing rehabilitation work with young people, there are going to be causes that relate back to the community at large that have actually influenced the way that child's found themselves today. And so we need to be in that space, and we need to be working hand in glove with not-for-profits, with churches and faiths, with anyone who wants to work in that space to make things a safe, loving environment for kids to be raised. And we live in Queensland, so we have the best place in the world. Why would we not want to make sure it's the best place for every child to be brought up?
Very good. Why do you believe the healthcare system is in such disarray?
I think there's a multitude of factors, and now what we have is we literally have dominoes. All right, so we have a whole series of dominoes lined up, that each of which needs work, each of which needs effort, but any one's not going to fix the system. We're going to have to work on it collaboratively. It's going to have to be partnerships between state, federal government, and more than likely they're going to have to engage with the community sector as well. Because what we see is this: there's not enough beds in aged care places, which means that when people get to that part of their life, there's not the room for them. We have in our hospitals not enough inpatient beds, which is affected by the fact that we have not enough aged care places. We then have in our hospitals not enough doctors and nurses because we're having retention issues, because people are overworked and feeling stressed. The horrible example from last week, Rockhampton Hospital was at 160% capacity, 160% occupancy in the ED. Now on that shift, so they're over by 60%, on that shift they had 19 out of 25 nurses that were rostered available because there were people sick, and that happens to all of us. But that's the reflection of that we've got staff who are working above and beyond to provide services to Queenslanders, and they're giving their heart and soul. No one becomes a doctor, a nurse or a wardsman without having people at heart, but they're overworked. So that becomes a crisis related to work shortages or staff shortages and training shortages. That then feeds into the fact that we need to be providing more regional training solutions, and we've got CQU who's working really diligently in that space and looking to provide more opportunities for doctors to study rural medicine in regional settings, because once a person comes and is part of a community, they want to stay. But of course, that's not the answer when those guys are doing so much overtime and spending so much time in the hospital itself that they don't actually become part of the community, they don't become ingrained. They just see it as the place that they work because they're working too hard. So we've got to get that balance right along the way. And then the other challenge that we have is just around the resourcing of the support services there. So if we look at Queensland Ambulance Service, we know that our AMBOs are working huge hours. Just like our doctors and nurses, we know that there are not enough to be running multiple crews at a time. That puts extra strain on the system, which then means that when the ambulance get ramped at Rockhampton Hospital, and we know it's 48% ramping, so 1 in 2 ambulances that rock up at the Rockhampton Hospital get stuck there for hours at a time. We've got crews that are off duty, well, they're not off duty. We've got crews that are sitting because they're providing, immediate patient care, while we've got people who are calling ambulances that are unable to get there in time, which then connects in with access to GPs in family and rural clinic settings, which we know is a federal government issue. All of these things are dominoes. They all have problems that need to be dealt with individually, but collectively, we're going to need to work on that space. And it's been a way too easy answer for quite some time to go, oh, well, that's a federal issue, and if they just fix that, everything else will be fine. Or, oh, no, that's a state issue. Like, that back and forth doesn't get Queenslanders anywhere, right? We deserve world-class health system. It doesn't matter which part of Queensland we live in. We should be able to get the support needs that we have in a regional setting. Now, the tyranny of distance and the tyranny of cost efficiencies does sometimes mean that they'll make choices around having things that are based in Rockhampton that some of us will travel to. But what are the supports we put in place to get people there? We need to work on that. And Ros Bates, who is the Shadow Health Minister, she has a wealth of knowledge in this space, not because she's listened to experts, because she's an RN. She's been on the floor. Her sister's an RN. They've seen what this looks like. They've seen how it works in action. And I really hope, and I'm going to work each and every day so that we can work for better health outcomes for Queenslanders, but so she can be the health minister who actually starts fixing these things by working with the federal government, by putting the resourcing in place, and by making sure that our doctors and nurses are back in the role of leading these organisations instead of just being left below what is become a corporate body that leads them now.
Very good. I can tell you've thought about it. It's probably more multifaceted than people normally think.
And the challenge is, Levi, that this is the life that Queenslanders are experiencing every day. Like, I had someone the other day say, oh, Nigel, you've become very negative around healthcare. I said, well, actually, I love healthcare. When I was studying to be a teacher, I worked at the Appleton and Rocky Hospital, so I'd work up in the medical, surgical, or the maternity ward up there doing ward clerking on Saturday, Sunday morning, and every afternoon I was coming back and I was doing the admin in the emergency department at the Appleton Hospital. My mum's been a nurse for 40 years, and I've seen her come home and, the tiredness that she's borne, and now she's retired and, she's probably living her best life, but these are not isolated stories. We're having people every day say, hey, this system's failing me and Queenslanders deserve better, and I want to fix that. And I think, we alluded to it earlier in a previous conversation, that when you're someone who's really committed to making a difference, when you see someone in pain or when you see something that just doesn't make sense, you want to get in there and fix it. And in 50 days, I'm hoping that with the support of the people of Keppel, that I'll have the chance to do that for Central Queenslanders.
Great. Do you think that it's contradictory to build state-owned petrol stations while having agreed net zero energy targets? And you touched on this earlier, but I guess we can just sort of have a quick overview of it.
Yeah, to be honest, I think it's economic vandalism. What we're seeing from the current government is that they are facing down an election where they've stopped listening to Queenslanders. Queenslanders know, and they've finally caught on to the fact that there's some problems. And so what they're doing is they're throwing money, and even if it's a half harebrained idea, they're having a crack at it. And in this case, 12 servos that are cost of $3 million each is not going to fix the problem. And if anything, all they're doing is hurting small operators and local operators who provide the competition in the marketplace. And like I said, are we going to see a Queensland government servo, which if we think about it, the award wage that they would have to employ their staff under, surely I've never known a government employee to earn a minor wage. So we're probably going to have the most expensive operating cost of any service station in the state. And now we're going to expect Queenslanders to have somehow get magically cheaper fuel from that service station. I would have thought their operating costs would be higher because they're not going to sell the cigarettes. That would be a terrible sign for the government in terms of health outcomes, that they're promoting the selling of cigarettes and becoming the producer. Yet it's become the policy of the Palajay-Miles Labor government. They have lost track of where Queenslanders are at. Would Queenslanders like that money invested into health? Yes. Would Queenslanders like that money invested in more police or resourcing to support our hardworking police every day of the week? Would they like that invested on the ground in solutions to support infrastructure development? 100% yes. So it's economic vandalism. We don't support it. And is it contradictory? I think it's literally just a sign of where this government's at, that they will do anything and everything to try and get over the line on October 26, and Queenslanders are going to see through it, and they need to be ready for that.
What's the difference between the LNP party position and the Labor Party position on those net zero targets? Has Kusa fully come over to sort of support that? That's sort of, again, it's probably should go to the website and read the policy, which I will do. But you're here, so you can answer the question for me. What is that difference there?
Queenslanders need affordable and effective electricity that is not going to be able to be provided by 100% renewables. The LNP know that, the LNP are working towards that, and as part of the LNP policy is that all power or energy-driven developments need to actually be code accessible, which means that their environmental impact needs to be challenged. Because at the moment we see that the rules that are applied to the development of a coal-fired power plant or any other sort of power plant do not apply to renewable energy projects, and we're seeing some terrible environmental vandalism because of this. And we're going to hold that to account. I have no problem with diversity in the energy market. In fact, I believe that it's good to have diversity, but people need reliable, stable power, and they also need to know that the outcomes that are being sought in terms of promoting green energy, or however it would like to be coded, is actually what it says. Look at what's going up at Marlborough, 20-metre wide tracks to put in wind turbines. Where's the environmental damage being assessed? Oh, well, actually, because it's a wind turbine, it doesn't count. Obviously, that's not good enough for Queenslanders, and we need to do something about that. And Queenslanders need to remember that the royalties that are being paid out by our coal sources of energy are actually being invested back in Queensland. Now, do I agree with all of the ways that it's being invested? Not necessarily, and like I said, it's being baked into operating costs. You can't rely on a non-sustainable long-term source to provide. Anyway, sorry.
That's all right.
Just bugs
I
me.
guess, so to move on to another, sort of current issue for the people of Keppel, there's been what's labelled as an exclusive use, a native title claim on Great Keppel Island. Are you able to share with us your sort of take on that?
Oh, yeah. The LNP does not support the provision for an exclusive use. The LNP does not support an exclusive use title being provided on Great Keppel Island. The day that this was disclosed and came out in the media across central Queensland, David Crisafulli came out and stated that we do not support it. I guess it's threefold. Number one, for families like you and I who've lived here our whole lives, our families have already shared in this island. So to say that something that yesterday we could access, we can't access tomorrow, seems a bit confusing. Number two, the economic viability of the island is based on its capacity to have both obviously day visitors as well as people who are staying there longer term and residents. So that needs to be considered as part of the mix. An exclusive land right lease would not allow for that, and therefore the LNP came out the day that it came out and said, no, we will not support it.
Okay, very good. On election day, only a few weeks from now, you're going to be handing out a how to vote card with your face on it from the LNP. What are you going to be saying to people when you put that in their hands?
That's a great question. I'll be talking to Queenslanders about voting for change and voting for hope. Queenslanders have had enough of this government. Everywhere I go, I'm hearing from Queenslanders around the failings. When I'll be handing out, I'll be asking them to vote for change and to vote for hope, because I believe that Queensland's best days are in front of it, and that David Crisafulli and an LNP team can play a part in that alongside the community, because they're never going to be able to do it by themselves. So I don't believe that government can do it all, but I do believe that when a government works in partnership with its people, great things can happen, and that's what I believe we can work over the next 4 years with an LNP government, and hopefully a lot longer than that.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down. Good luck over the next few weeks. It'll be a busy time for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, it's an exciting time. Obviously, I'm well and truly supported by having my wonderful wife and 2 kids, as well as I'm one of 5 kids, so my siblings are all in the area, and mum and dad, which definitely means that we've got, Team Hutton on tap to make a difference. But the overwhelming support of the community has been wonderful, and I'm really grateful for all of those who've put not only their faith in me to be their voice. It's quite humbling when someone says, Nigel, I've got this story, but I'd like you to share it because I don't feel that I can do so, or because they're a public servant, they don't feel they have the right to share their story. But it's also a great privilege to be able to be part of something where we can change things, we can make it better. And even though it feels sometimes like you're sitting on your hands just waiting, it will be all the worthwhile if we can make a change for the betterment of Queensland.
So good. Thanks for taking the time.
No, cheers, mate.